everyone. Welcome to this GeoTalks Express webinar. My name is Cynthia Miranda, and I am the Director of Marketing here at Blue Marble Geographics. In my role, I am responsible for expanding our academic program and supporting professors who wish to use our software to teach GIS and geodetics. I'm lucky to have my colleague Jenna Nelson here today with me. Jenna is an application specialist here at Blue Marble, and she's going to join me in today's presentation. Hello, Jenna. How are you today?
Hey Cynthia, I'm doing well. Excited to be here.
Oh, that's great. We have a great, beautiful day here in Maine. Spring has finally arrived, and we're really pumped. So, I'll begin today's session by sharing some important information about our academic programs designed to support GIS instructors who wish to bring Global Mapper or Geographic Calculator, or even both, to their classroom. In the second half of this presentation, Jenna will demonstrate how easy it is to use our academic curriculum. Before we begin, I'd like to share some information about the format of this presentation with you. You are in listen-only mode, meaning that Jenna and I cannot hear you. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, you may submit them via chat. You can find your chat dialog box on the right side of your screen, and we will try to answer all questions throughout this webinar. However, if we are unable to do so, we'll answer them later and we'll send you an email with all the responses. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded. In fact, all of our webinars are recorded, and a link to access the recording is emailed to all registered attendees after the session. If this is your first GeoTalks Express webinar, welcome again. We offer one free webinar per month. Some of them cover new features and tools available in new versions of our products, and others cover tips and tricks on how to best use our applications. We recommend you sign up for as many sessions as you'd like, and if you can't attend on the day, don't worry. We'll email you a link of the recording a few days after the session. However, only registered attendees get the email with that link to the recording. So make sure to register for as many webinars as you think might be helpful to you. As you can see from these dates, we are taking a break during the summer, but our fall schedule is available on our website and registration is now open. So to learn more about each one of these sessions, we have short abstracts on our website describing what we're going to cover on each session. Please visit our website at bluemarblegeo.com/geotalks-express-webinars. But if you just go to bluemarblegeo.com, you easily find on the menu where the webinars are. We also offer training classes and even a certification program. You can become a certified Global Mapper user and add that badge to your CV and LinkedIn profile. To become a certified user, you must take both the Global Mapper and the LiDAR processing courses, and the certification is issued at the end of the program. If you're looking for training, we offer online classes in June, August, October, and November. Also, if you are in the Denver area in November, we are offering an in-person class for those who prefer that modality. The LiDAR processing class is offered 1 week after the Global Mapper class. It's always like that. 1 week we offer the Global Mapper, the following week is a LiDAR processing class. So please visit our website. Again, the website is bluemarblegeo.com. This case now it's /GIS-training. But again, if you go to the main page, you'll easily find this. To learn more about our training program and how the certification process works. And if you're interested to join us, please register for any of these upcoming classes. So let's talk about Blue Marble academic programs. After all, that's what you're here for, right? It's important for me to note that our applications are ideally suited for GIS education and instruction, especially when GIS is a component of a broader field of study. Our generous academic licensing program provides complimentary access to both the Global Mapper and Geographic Calculator um, for accredited schools and colleges in the United States, Brazil, Canada, France, Germany, and Italy. Discounted licenses are also available to accredited institutions in other parts of the world. This is important for any student who's attending this webinar here today. Students cannot request an academic license on their own. The application needs to come from an instructor from that accredited institution. So once we receive the application, one of our associates will go through the due diligence process of confirming the information submitted, and if the application is approved, the instructor will receive a set number of licenses to be used for classroom instruction, as well as for the students enrolled in that course to complete their work. So it's very important to, for any student present here today, if you're really interested in bringing Global Mapper or Geographic Calculator to your school, please make sure to talk to your instructors and let them know that they need to go to our website and submit the application on behalf of the university. It needs to come from an instructor. To learn more about our academic programs, to submit that application, please visit our website at bluemarblegeo.com/academic programs. Once again, if you go to the main page, you'll find the information very easily as well. The Global Mapper curriculum, academic curriculum, is comprised of a series of hands-on lessons that are available at no cost to schools and colleges using Global Mapper in their classroom. Our goal for this program is to streamline the deployment of Global Mapper within the academic community while introducing some of the fundamental principles of GIS in a concise and understandable way. The curriculum includes a series of 12 hands-on instructional labs that provide step-by-step instruction on some of the key functions of the software. Each lab allows students to follow a prescribed workflow to a defined conclusion. It also includes a free-form exercise that requires participants to employ their knowledge and skills learned in the lab in a problem-solving scenario. My colleague Jenna will go through a few examples in just a moment. So again, to learn more about our academic program and to submit an application, please visit our website at bluemarblegeo.com/academic-programs. And before I pass the screen to Jana, I also wanted to let you know that we also provide an annual academic scholarship, which gives incentive to our students to really pay attention in class and do all their homework and all their projects on time. Students have a chance to win a $1,000 scholarship, which is paid directly to their school, and a Global Mapper Pro license by submitting the results of a school project involving either Global Mapper or Geographic Calculator, or in some cases, we have received applications with projects that students use both of our programs in their work. The scholarship is open to undergraduate and graduate students currently attending an accredited institution of higher education. So to learn more about the scholarship program, you can find more information on our website. And again, that URL is bluemarblegeo.com/academic programs. And now I'm going to pass the screen to my colleague, Jenna, who will demonstrate how easy it is to use our academic labs. All right, Jenna, you can take it away from here.
All right, thank you, Cynthia. So what I will be showing you, let me share my screen. All right, so Cynthia explained how you can request our academic licensing and our academic curriculum. And now I'm going to be showing you what you'll receive if you request that free curriculum. You'll receive a folder with all the materials you need to teach these lessons. And I'm going to start by showing you the overview document that you'll receive. And I like this overview document because it goes over each of the labs or lessons, there are 12 different labs, and they each have a theme or a GIS concept that they teach and use Global Mapper as the tool to explore that concept. So the first lab is an introduction to GIS, suitable across many different academic programs that may need to use a GIS software. It's also great for if you're just getting started with Global Mapper or your students are just getting started with Global Mapper because it covers the really basic principles such as getting data in and out of the program, different types of data, and beginning spatial analysis. And I'll show you an example of that in just a moment. Lab 2 is focused on using LiDAR data. So again, that is XYZ points. They have elevation and their discrete points that we can then use, we can process those to create 3D models or elevation grids or contours. Lab 3 has a theme of working with attributes and mapping. So that will give you an introduction to using the attributes of the data, whether that's like a numerical value or more of a theme of like a type of land use or buildings that you need to represent visually in discrete ways to create maps. This will be a great introduction to creating maps and using our map layout editor. Lab 4, uh, this lab is about rectifying an image file, and I'll actually show an example of this in a moment as well, so stay tuned for that. It's very easy in Global Mapper to take imagery. This could be unreferenced imagery and actually assign coordinates to it so that you can use it in a GIS software. Lab 5 is about extracting vector features so we can easily pull out certain features from imagery or another raster layer, maybe a topographic map, and then we can take those features and analyze them or create other maps with those features. Lab 6, it has a watershed theme. Um, Global Mapper has great tools for watershed analysis and flood mapping. And so Lab 6 covers how to start using those tools and perform those type of analysis. Lab 7 returns to the LiDAR theme and it's a little bit more advanced um, processing of the LiDAR so we can extract features from it. And I'll show an example of this as well today because this is one of the areas that Global Mapper really shines. Lab 8 is raster calculation, specifically calculating NDVI values, which you may be familiar with, can be used for assessing vegetation health. We look at doing a comparison uh, between two different layers, so maybe assessing that vegetation health over time. Lab 9 is creating a point cloud using our Pixels to Points tool. Now, Pixels to Points is a Global Mapper specific tool that is used to process drone collected photogrammetry. So if you have access to drones and capturing drone imagery, or it might be of interest to your students, definitely check out this lab because it goes over everything you would need to know in order to perform that operation. Basically, we can take drone collected imagery and create point clouds from that imagery or create ortho images. Um, we can even create a 3D mesh model of the area. Um, so that is actually very interesting to see. Lab 10 is a suitability analysis. So this is a great example project of site planning and figuring out where would be a suitable place to put a solar power project. Um, Obviously, your students, you want to give them the tools that they may need in order to complete other projects. So they might end up, wanting to be able to complete a suitability analysis for some other project. This will at least give them an idea of how to go about doing that in Global Mapper. Lab 11 is a change detection analysis, again, returning to some point cloud data um, and looking at creating elevation models from that data. And then Lab 12 is another terrain themed lesson. This one says hydro flattening and terrain painting. I should probably explain what terrain painting is. It's another global mapper specific tool that can be used to edit elevation data. So you can actually make changes to the grid or the terrain surface. So this could be great for site planning, construction, 3D modeling, anything like that. We have tools for that in Global Mapper, and that can be very useful to students, again, across disciplines. So that's an overview of the different labs that are available to you. Again, these are completely free at no charge to accredited institutions, and we hope that you'll take advantage of this curriculum. I'll show you what else you'll receive. Obviously, you're going to receive instructions, and again, they're broken out into the individual labs so that you can pick and choose which labs are relevant to the course that you're teaching. I'll open up Lab 1 just as an example. These PDFs could be just a reference for you if you're teaching this in a classroom to your students, or you may wish to distribute these to the students if you have them working independently on these projects. They are printable if you are needing to print them out. They're sized so that you can print them. And basically all of the instructions that you would need to complete the lab are here in the PDF. Very clear instructions, lots of screenshots, um, pictures of the tools, tool settings, so that you can very easily follow along with the instructions to complete the lab. Um, at the end of the lab is another assignment actually as well, or exercise. This could be a homework assignment perhaps, because it basically reinforces the concepts in the lab, but without going through and telling students exactly how to complete it. So the students have to think a little bit more creatively and kind of recall the processes and that they did in the lab and apply that to a new situation. So I really like these because you could customize this very easily to work with a certain type of data or theme that you had in mind. So that's the instructions, and then the other main component that you need obviously is the data. And again, we have the data in a folder, all organized by lab as well, because we know you might want to pick and choose from the labs and to pick certain labs that will be relevant for your courses. The labs don't really need to be completed in a specific order, but we do recommend starting with the first one or first couple of them if you're new to Global Mapper or new to GIS. So if I look in Lab 1, we can see, again, the data is all in here and ready to go. There's one other folder that you'll receive, which might be very handy for you, especially if you are new to Global Mapper, and that's actually a finished exercises folder. And this probably wouldn't be something you would distribute to students, but is a great reference for you, especially if you're teaching a lot of different courses and trying to keep track of different assignments. If you want to be able to check a lab very easily and see what that exercise looks like, that there's actually a package file in there that you can open and see what the completed lab should look like, and you can check that everything went successfully. There's even a little README file that explains in text what you should be looking at. So that's a brief overview of what you'll receive. And now I'm going to dive into one of these labs and actually go through a couple workflows. Again, especially if you're new to Global Mapper and you want to see Global Mapper in action, I'll go through a couple of these labs so that you can see these tools and how easy it is to follow the labs. So I'm going to go back to the data folder and pull out a couple things from lab number one. I'm not going to start at the very beginning of lab one, though the lab does start with some great intro things for using Global Mapper. I'm going to assume that either you know a little bit about operating Global Mapper or that you'll go through that and you'll be fine. What I'm going to pull out is a couple shape files. Got one of Maine towns right here, so we can see each of the town boundaries. And I'm going to pull up some points. Um, and these points represent cell phone towers across the state of Maine. And what we're going to do for our very beginning spatial analysis is just start to visualize this point data in a way that we can see the point density and start drawing conclusions about this point density and where these points are located across Maine. We can see a little bit already just from displaying it on the map, but map's also kind of cluttered in certain areas, so it's hard to see all of the points at this scale. So this lab, again, it's a very beginning spatial analysis lab, but great introduction to talking about GIS concepts. And this is actually section 6 of the lab. And here you can see in the instructions, we are opening the data and we're launching a tool, and we've been given some parameters for the tool, some suggested parameters. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to turn off the towns, and so we're looking just at the point data, and we're going to analyze this point data with a grid. So Global Mapper's Create Grid tool is located right here, and I'm just going to click on the map, and now I can set up my grid. And I'm just going to keep it basic for this lesson. We're making a grid of 10 by 10 number of rows, 10 kilometers width and height. And we could set this at a certain point, but I'm just going to use the point that I clicked on the map. And just as easy as that, I've created a grid. Now if I zoom in a little bit, we can see the grid is labeled A1, A2, A3. Each cell has that label on it. Now, the reason I created this grid is that I'm going to use these tiles and get a count of the points within the tiles, just as a way of starting to look at the distribution of these points. This is very easy to do. Basically, I'm going to select this grid with what we call the digitizer in Global Mapper. And the digitizer is a tool for all types of vector analysis and creation. There are so many subtools of the digitizer, but for now we're just going to select the grid, and I'm going to go into a menu, into the attribute menu, and we're going to add attributes to this grid. We're going to add attributes with a count of points, so that now each of these tiles will have a count of the points. So that, again, was quick to run for this small area. And we can check that it worked by going into that grid layer's attributes. So now if I look at A1, there's a point count column here. This wasn't there before, just added it with that digitizer tool. And there's 2 points in that cell, 14 points in this one, 10 points in that one. So we've got some information here. But we want to make this information a little bit more accessible. So the next step in this lesson is to actually change the labels of the cells to be the point count. So that way we can just look at that very easily. So I go into the grid vector options, and we have this tab for controlling the labels, and I just simply choose to use an attribute value. So I'm going to use that point count attribute. There are other options depending on, other attributes, but that's the one that we are interested in right now. So I'm going to apply that, and we can see that the labels have updated to all of the counts of the points. So again, another way to look at this data. Um, but we can do better than this. We can make this a little bit easier to interpret by actually changing the style of the areas. So we're going to go back to the grid options, and this time we're going to go to area styles. And this is in this tab here, we can apply different colors or patterns to areas based on an attribute. And actually for this lesson, we've created a style file for you to make it easier to just easily apply some styling. So it's actually included in the data folder for this lab in the towers, and this is a layer style file. We did this just to make it very easy for you to get into this feature and have some colors and some numbers as a starting point. Again, we want to make these labs as accessible to everyone as possible. We want to make it very easy for you to get into the software and start doing things. So that way you can focus on the overarching GIS concepts and not get bogged down in trying to use a new software, right? So that we've already done this work for you, and you can click apply. And now we have these colors so that the darker blue is representing the more points, the higher point counts, and the lighter blue would be lower point counts. From this point, you might want to talk to your students about how you might determine what numbers to use for what colors, and how, if we remove one of these values, how will that change the map? Um, how will that change people's perception of the data here? Um, another great tool that gets discussed in this lab is the heat map or point density tool as well. So we made a grid here, but we could use this density grid tool and instead represent the data this way. So I'm just going to run it really quickly just so you see what it does. Now we have a little bit more precise clusters being represented by the colors here. And so it's a different way of visualizing the data. And again, great time for you to talk to your students about, well, which way do they feel is more accurate or better at representing the data? When might you want a grid as opposed to a heat map or a density map? And just a great moment to really talk about, visualizing data, completing these analysis, how there's different options that they have, and what would happen if we change these colors or change these parameters. So that is our very quick intro to spatial analysis lesson. Do we have any questions that have come in so far?
Yeah, we have quite a few actually, Jenna. So question number one, how long do these labs take in general? What's an average time requirement for the labs?
Um, it might depend a little bit on your familiarity with this software. I would say probably maybe 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 like half an hour or so um,
Yeah, I
to
know some
really
of them
cover.
are even shorter than that, so 15 to 30 minutes and right, because we've all taken that. So yeah, so I
Yeah.
think yeah, so it's certainly something that you can add to your own, program, your own curriculum. The other question that somebody submitted here, what are the hardware requirements for effective use of Global Mapper in terms of students installing it on their own? So we have step-by-step instructions when we submit the information about installation of how to use the software, how to install it. Um, it's important to note that this is a PC program, so it's not compatible with Apple computers. So that's something that it's worth mentioning. But yeah, Jenna is even bringing it up now.
Yeah, so these are our minimum system requirements, 8 GB RAM. Um, m- I would say, you could check this. Most computers should be able to handle the basic operations. Running our pixels to points tool is the only thing that and maybe some of our 3D analysis in viewer might be a problem on some computers, but for the most part, check these requirements and you should be all set.
And we send that information with the licenses, so you should be all set. Now, the third question that I have here, Jenna, is can you visualize the point count on the lab that you just demonstrated in the town shape file instead of using a grid?
Sure, sure. Great question. So, and I used a grid, which is kind of an arbitrary boundary uh, to look at the distribution of the points, but maybe you have more meaningful boundaries that you want to analyze your points with, and you could use, for instance, the town shape file so that you could actually get a count within each of those separate polygons instead. The operation would be the same. You'd select the features with the digitizer, go into that menu, get the point count, and visualize with that point count. So yeah, totally possible. All right, so that was our intro to spatial analysis. I'm now gonna change gears and go into a different lab. I'm gonna go into lab 4, which I mentioned was about imagery processing and specifically working with unreferenced imagery or needing to correct imagery location to re-rectify imagery. So this lab starts with actually taking unreferenced imagery and referencing it. And this is a great lab for students who might end up working with historical data or printed maps that they might need to scan in, any kind of unreferenced data, and being able to actually turn that into referenced data so that you can compare it with modern maps or um, just to be able to have that referenced. Very, very easy to do actually in Global Mapper. So let's look at this example here. This is just a JPEG image file. There's no, I can't load this into Global Mapper right now because it's just an image. There's no coordinates attached to it. It's a historical map of Central Park in New York City. And what we can do is we can actually reference that so that we can open that in Global Mapper and we can see how this would line up with another map. So what I'm going to do is go back to Global Mapper, and what I need some something to reference it to, and actually have a TIFF file that I'm going to use. And this is referenced data. As you can see, the coordinates are displayed down here. This is actually free data though that I obtained, and I'm going to take a moment to stop and explain one of the tools that is used in this lab. It's our online data portal. And this is really, really great for students because it makes it very easy for them to access free data for their projects. So the Global Mapper online data portal provides easy access to imagery, some terrain, um, different data sets. They're all listed here. I can't go through them all right now, but one that I'm going to point out is the OpenStreetMaps. If you're not familiar with OpenStreetMaps, it is open source data. There are thousands of users all over the world contributing to these online maps and keeping them up to date. And you can very easily download either vector or imagery from OpenStreetMaps. Um, so that's where this file actually came from. Some of these other ones, such as like the USGS data. Some of these will actually just link you to those portals where you can then download them. But either way, it makes it easier to bring data into Global Mapper. So here's my OpenStreetMap layer. This was originally vector features, but we've downloaded it as imagery, and we're going to reference our historical map of Central Park to this map. So let's bring in our historical map, and notice that Global Mapper prompts us right away. It says, we don't know where on Earth this map is until you tell us. So what we're going to do is we're going to manually rectify this image. All right, so this is Global Mapper's image rectifier. Um, as you can see, we have the historical map here in one view and our reference image over here in the other view. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to find common features so that we can link a pixel value from this image to a real world coordinate in this coordinate system of the reference image. So for example, this circle is still here. So we can find that in both images, and I can place a point at the center of the circle just to roughly get started with this georeferencing. Okay, so I've got a point here. This is a pixel value, and then we have the coordinates that, that correspond with the reference image. We'll add that point to our list, and we've begun our georeferencing. So at this point, we would start identifying other features. We need at least a few points to scale and rotate this image. So we would have to find a few more points. Global Mapper will automatically choose a rectification method for you based on how many points you put in and what will work best with the least amount of error. I'm actually gonna load in, I've already done some of this, and so that you don't have to watch me try to find different points in the image, I've already done this, and I'm gonna bring in a couple points. So 3 points is all I need to at least scale and rotate this image into place. So now I have my 3 points listed here, and I can apply it. When I click OK, I go back to the workspace, I can see that both of these are now in here, and that my Central Park historical map is now laid right over my OpenStreetMap. So it's now been georeferenced. If I choose to export this now, it'll export with these coordinates. I can also do a few different things to check how well it's lining up. I like to turn on the transparency so that you can kind of see both at the same time. And we can see, how well did this work? Do we need to make some adjustments? And if we need to make some adjustments, we can easily go back in to the rectifier and add points or remove points. So that is a quick and easy georeferencing data in Global Mapper. Again, that's part of lab number 4. Any questions on this?
Yeah, I have a question here. If you know the coordinates for some of the features in this image, can you simply type them?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. Let me go back to the rectifier. So it might be the case that you have some either there's coordinates written on the map and you know the system that they're in, or that you have some kind of control points that you can use. You don't have to do the clicking back and forth. If you can just simply find that pixel value, and then you can actually type the coordinate in so you can be a little bit more precise about where it's being put or referenced. And so you actually don't necessarily need a reference image in that case, because if you know the coordinates of several of those points. Yeah, great. All right. So we have time for another lab. So I'm gonna unload this. And again, since I'm trying to show a variety of Global Mapper tools, um, to those of you that maybe haven't used Global Mapper before, this time we're going to look at Lab 7. And this is actually, let me bring up the instructions actually just for a moment. This is LiDAR classification and extraction. Um, and in case you haven't done this type of workflow before, let me give a quick overview of what we'll look at. We're going to bring in a LiDAR point cloud, and we're going to classify each of those points as a type of point, a type of feature. So we have to look at it and say, okay, how, given certain parameters, what do we think in this point cloud is the ground? What do we think could be buildings? Can we find those features just by the way that the points are distributed? So we'll classify those points. Um, and then once we have those classified, we can start extracting those features or creating grids. We can create a terrain model, and create a digital terrain model or bare earth surface, because we can pull out just those ground points and then we can turn that into a 3D grid. And then we can also actually pull out things like buildings and trees as well and have those represented as 3D vector features too. So that is what we're going to look at right now. So I'll bring in the data for this lab, and there's going to be a point cloud and an image. When I load in this LiDAR point cloud, I'm just going to load all of the points. All right. So this is an image of the area. We're looking at just a small piece of Portland, Maine. We can see in the image just this little piece of reference imagery that was likely downloaded from our online portal as well. We can see that there's some buildings, there's some residential area, there's roads, there's trees that we are going to try to extract some of these features actually in 3D. So let's go to our point cloud and let's color it by elevation just so you can see, in case you haven't really looked at a point cloud in 3D, this is what that will look like. So we have in red some of the taller features, and we can kind of see from the shape that there's probably, some vegetation, some trees, some buildings. But if we want to pull out the exact locations of these features, we're going to need to classify this point cloud. Right now, if we color this by classification, everything is gray. There's nothing that's been classified. Some point clouds that you download from like the USGS, they might have done that ground classification for you, and that can be helpful. But in this case, we're starting from scratch. But that's okay, because Global Mapper has great tools for processing this type of thing. So we can use our auto ground classification. All of these parameters are explained in more detail in the lab. So I'm not going to take a lot of time to go over that right now. But basically, we can set up this tool for the density of this particular cloud and the this particular area. We can say, well, we know that this is not a steep slope area, so we set up the slope to be fairly low. We know that there could be some large buildings in here, so we set this fairly high, et cetera, et cetera. And then we run the tool. And it actually runs pretty quickly, right? So now we have the ground classified, and Global Mapper has colored any points that it thinks are ground as brown. And we can check this out with our path profile tool. And what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to move this over here so it's a little easier to see. And now in the 2D, I can draw a line across this area and pull out a slice of these points. So this profile, now we can see that pretty well that the ground has been identified and colored brown, and then the other points are still gray. We still don't know what those are. We haven't classified those as anything yet, but we do have pretty well different areas that the ground has been identified. We always start with the ground and work our way up because that ground is going to provide a basis from which to measure other features. So that now, if we look for other features, we can say, how tall are they? How tall should they be above the ground? And things like that. Before we do that, though, I'm actually going to take this and create a digital elevation model from just these ground points. So Global Mapper has this elevation grid tool. And what we can do is we can decide that we want just like a bare earth model, uh, what some we might refer to as a digital terrain model, DTM. And we can now, because we've classified this point cloud, we can use just these ground points when we're building that and gridding that into a raster format, really. So now we have that set up, and we can specify the spacing if we want as well. Let's do 1 meter, and let's create that grid. All right, so now we have this grid that's been created. Um, we have a few little holes because there wasn't ground there because there were very like large buildings. So we could actually run the tool again and make it a little bit looser and have it interpolate where the ground might be. But this is going to suit my purposes for today, so I'm going to leave that. And we can see that in 3D too if I turn off the point clouds. So you can see this is a 3D terrain layer of the area. All right, so one more thing that we're going to do, and we're going to go back to the point cloud and extract the building features. So the other tool that we're going to run is an auto classify non-ground LiDAR points. And we have a couple methods for this, but this lab is going to use the gridded method, and it's going to check certain areas and look for these types of structures, right? And so we're going to run this tool. It's actually going to pull out buildings and vegetation. And there we go. The buildings are now represented with the orange color, and the likely vegetation is green. Again, I can do a little 3D path, and we can see, oh, here's a building roof. Here's likely some trees as well. So we can check to see how well that worked. If we needed to, we could run it again with different settings. So now that we have these features identified, our final step is to extract them as vector features. Because again, right now they're still just points, and it can be hard to, work with this. Like we want some actual some lines to know exactly where these buildings are. We want to have them constructed in 3D. So we're going to extract the building features. And this lab actually covers trees as well, so but I'm not going to do that right now. But that can be very cool as well, especially if you're looking at comparing vegetation over time or something like that. You could actually check the tree heights and things. But let's extract buildings, and we could choose to just get the footprints if that's all we needed, but I'm going to ask Global Mapper to figure out where the walls and roof planes would be as well, because I want to visualize these in 3D. So now Global Mapper takes just a second to look for all the planes and stitch them together. And now, if I turn off the point cloud, you can see that Global Mapper has outlined most of these buildings. And some of the shapes come out a little bit interesting because, this isn't a very dense point cloud, so it's doing the best it can with the data that it had. But Let's turn on some ground so that they aren't floating in space. Let's turn on our digital elevation model. And so now we have extracted buildings on a surface. And this was all done from the LiDAR data. We have basically 3D model of our area. We can even take the imagery and layer that over the ground so that now we can kind of get a better idea where these features are located um, in 3D. So yeah, do we have any questions that have come in? Let's see.
I do. I do have one question here, Jenna. Someone is asking if the labs need to be taught in order or if the instructor can choose what to incorporate into their own curriculum.
Great question. Um, so each of these labs can be a standalone lesson. We do recommend starting with lab one just because it is more of a um, introduction lab, and uh, that goes over a lot of really basic things for operating Global Mapper and working with GIS data. But other than that, you can pretty much go through them in pick and choose which ones are relevant to your course. And, you might see that some of them build a little bit, like if, we have a couple different LiDAR data themed ones, but really you could work on them in a different order if that makes sense to you. Yeah.
Ex Excellent. So I am going to show my screen here. Jenna, thank you so much for demonstrating how easy it is to use our academic curriculum. And with that, we're done for now for this webinar. So I would like to thank all of you for being here today, for attending the session. And I wanted to give you this screen just to show you some um, emails that you can contact us if you have any questions with regards to our academic programs, or once again, the URL for you to visit our website, take a look at all the information we presented today is available online, as well as the application to request the academic curriculum from us and the academic licenses. So once again, thank you for being here today. And we hope that you do bring Global Mapper and Geographic Calculator to your classroom. Thanks, Jenna, for joining me today. All right, everybody, have a great day.